So let's start off with a fresh CellProfiler I just opened, and it shows you this welcome screen. It's got a bunch of links for helpful things, forums and help files, etc. Good for if you're just starting. You can click on all of those, check those out. I'm going to start with a couple of images here in my folder for playing around with, and these files I've projected in the Z direction. Generally I don't work with 3D stuff in CellProfiler as much. You can do it, will go through each individual Z and you can group them together, and it adds another layer of complication at times. Most of the time when you're dealing with cells that are on the cover slip, the Z information is not as relevant to a lot of experiments, and you can take a Z stack and project it down and look at the size of the shape and the distribution just in X, Y a lot of the times. If you need to do things in Z, then it's better to go to a 3D program like a Maris, for example. So these images are being projected at maximum projection in the Z direction, and there's an accompanying Fiji tutorial on how to project, how to batch project a lot of files in a Z to give you all of these 2D images from the Z files you have if you want to go in that direction. So you drag and drop them into this file list area, and you can have a bunch of different folders, and you can just throw in the whole folder and do images only, or if you have a bunch of things you don't want to bring in, you just want to bring in the TIFFs, for example, you can do a custom. And let's get rid of that one and just do, for example, what type of extension, or the file contains a certain code from a certain part of the experiment, things like that. And you can use it just to pick out certain files from the list to test. So you don't have to go through the whole ones when you're testing, you can jump between a few different ones. I often recommend people have 3 different files, a good one, a bad one, and a medium one from a particular set of images they've taken, and then play around and try and get the settings to work okay across the board, because you're never going to get it to work perfectly on the really dim ones and the really bright ones at the same time. So it's nice to go back and make sure your acquisition suits your analysis, and you can do this in an iterative process. But you can also, when you're setting up your analysis, you can try a few different types of images you have, or a few different images from the same acquisition. It's good to stick to the same magnification, for example, and the same experiment, and then you can have different pipelines or different projects here for different types of cells and things that are somewhat different in some cases. Okay, so once you've got the cells, and let's just go back to no filtering here. Once you've got the files, HeLa cell files here in place, we can go to the next section. And all of this is, think of it as coming downwards. Everything is all the way from top to bottom. And the next section is to bring in the metadata. A bunch of options here, but I've only ever used headers, or not used them at all and brought in just the individual files, and not had any metadata. It's done them one by one and got the file numbers. But mainly we'll have headers, we'll have some raw data formats that will have either LSM files, for example, or Olympus files and Nikon files will have some header information that will pull it in that way. The TIFFs we've saved do have some information, so we're going to update the metadata there and update there. So it's got enough to know the channels and the sizes and a few things that we need just to get rolling. And it's nice to see that you've got the files you bring in. For every file there should be an entry here for each channel or frame or Z, and then you have a long list if you have multiple Z stacks from different files in the list there. But it's nice to see they're all in place, and what we're going to do is we're going to pick them out based on some of this information here. So these different headers we're going to use in the next section. And so now what we're going to do, instead of just pulling every single image from that list, we're going to have a specific choice, and we're going to pull in the files. Here I'm going to have the nuclear one, and this image turns out to be the last section, last channel, sorry. And we're going to call this the nuke original. I like to put original or something on the end to let me know what it is. This is the original data set. And you can see the flashing there. The flashing in the program is it's updating and it's checking that everything matches. You have so many things that come together, it has to go through and check everything's in place. We're going to add another image. And let's make it tall. A lot of the windows are better off when they're tall in this CellProfiler a lot of the time. And we have the next one down with metadata. It does have C matching 0. In fact, I need to back this one off. This should be 2 because 0, 1, 2 on the increments, the channel numbers. And this one we're going to call Cyto Original. So this is cytoplasm. And then we can update, and we should see we have For each one of my images, I'm going to get a Cyto original and a Nucleo original. And these are the ones we're going to play with. So Cyto and Nucleo are the ones that we'll see as we go through the analysis, and we'll come back to that in a second. And that's essentially, that's the main steps I take for bringing it in there. Let me know if you've got any questions or things you want me to address in the comments. Thanks.